Welcome, welcome all and sundryment. Geekbeard here again with another video in which we are trying to explore and discover the true nature of God and the universe. Many think they know the answers, but the real truth is very hard to find. Okay, without further ado, we'll dive into some secret writings and see how we go. God completes me because both of those concepts are inherently ridiculous. Therefore, we just believe it. It's kind of like Christ's sacrifice on the cross, right? People say he died for our sins, which is sort of inherently ridiculous. And somehow ridiculous things come together and form a knot of logic. Contradictions actually attract one another. So it's kind of a contradiction for God to send his son to die on the cross, you know? And yet, that's the nature of this universe. It's full of these contradictions. They are the logical building blocks, even though some will claim they're illogical. Actually, all things are somewhat illogical when you dig down into them, because the universe needs poetry. This is the right hemisphere of the brain asserting itself. The left hemisphere, in which all things are sort of known and machine-like and algebraic and lingual, isn't sufficient to describe this universe. The right brain is the more spiritual part, and the more esoteric, and the more visual and artistic. And that's where the right brain is able to tolerate the tension inherent to these contradictions. That is something in and of itself, whereas the left brain just kind of explodes when it faces contradictions. But all is contradiction, believe me. The scientific materialists that think that if they dig deep enough, they'll find the answers to the universe, are only going to find confusing knots of logic that are going to drive them insane. They will never find the God equation, as they like to call it. They will never find the ultimate answer to everything. So God completes me. Focused on this when my AJ stream was playing up yesterday noon, and weirdly it seemed to help. Who is AJ? Well, I'm not sure I'm allowed to expand on that in this YouTube tech dystopia. But I'll say his name, Alex Jones. I'm a big fan of his. I watch him all the time. Let it hereby be acknowledged that this is a sacred document protected by the power of the Fermat Hexagon. Bind. Yeah, I'm sure you can find his stream, his videos, if you're interested, with a little bit of Googling. But, you know, he's a guy that has interesting concepts of religion. He, like me, is, and like all of you listening, is exploring this spiritual universe and trying to understand the true nature of it and the true nature of God, which is extremely difficult to illuminate. Okay, let's continue. But you have to think. A thought I've been having recently. Ironic, considering that I was stating earlier this week that the main reason I hate doing things is because I have to concentrate and therefore stop thinking freely. Okay, so but you have to think means you have to use your brain in this life. You have to think about things. A lot of people don't really want to think most of the time. Others, like me, want to let their brain just be free and kind of think whatever it thinks, rather than having to focus on work where you have to kind of like concentrate and use your brain to do specific tasks, which is pretty annoying, really. But you have to think in this life. God has created a world in which we have a mind and which we as humans are the pinnacle of intelligence anyway, and so you have to employ your mind. It's a strange kind of thing from that perspective, but it's true. Okay, let's continue. This is a quote. Incompleteness equals longing equals gravity, maybe also entropy. And then my commentary on it is, gravity is far from an antidote to incompleteness, at least in the form that we experience it. It might suffice for stars, planets, even galaxies. Incompleteness surely leads to longing, though, and it would be entropic. Longing is a very important concept, spiritually and metaphysically to me. Maybe I kind of adopted it after seeing the intro to the pretty interesting series called Raised by Wolves. Has anybody seen Raised by Wolves? The intro is like very eerie. And then there's part of it which says everything, every blah, blah, blah is longing. Longing. Longing is a very powerful thing. It's a strange word, really. So incompleteness equals longing. Well, that's kind of clear. If things are incomplete, like we are certainly incomplete, then we have longing. We have longing for partners and friends. We have desire for food and other forms of stimulation that we need to survive. We have longing for the great kind of outdoors and the great vastness of the universe. We have longing to understand all of that. But I think women feel longing stronger than men, actually. And longing and incompleteness equals longing equals gravity. See, gravity is almost like the rocks and the earth of the universe actually longing for each other. Because gravity is just a force between any two objects with mass. Wherever they are in the universe, they're attracted to one another. Isn't that crazy? It's a form of longing. It's like spiritually the rocks want to be rejoined into one whole. But just like us, they won't be satisfied. Their longing cannot be satisfied because longing is just a representation of your own incompleteness. And incompleteness can only be completed by God, as we have established. And that's true of all things, not just humans. All animals, all plants, and all rocks and dirt and water even. They all long for things because they are incomplete. They long for each other through gravity and other forces. But only God can complete them. In fact, God is nothing but that force of completion. You want to think of God as a human-like creature, a human-like being out there that you can actually talk to? I think that's a mistake. God completes you, but he is in some sense completely different from what you are, because that's the only way you can be completed, is by something fundamentally different. something complementary, you might say. So God is really kind of energetic and resides mostly in space, in the space between things. Because if you think about it, a physical object is in one location, but it's not complete in and of itself, because it has to be in space in order to be complete, in order to exist. And that space that completes it is basically God. Because all physical objects are incomplete, including you. Another quote: "The top of your head is practically open. A tendril connects you all the way to the Ein Sof," which is from Kabbalah, / intelligent infinity, which is sort of from the Law of One, / the black mirror at the edge of the universe, which is my own concept. And here's the commentary. Well, if we are allowed to have completeness in God, which is practically unified with our mind / spirit / soul, merely physical kinds of completeness are probably not allowed. What makes this philosophy good is that it takes you out of merely physical ways of conceiving things. And so many people are stuck in merely physical ways of conceiving things, particularly the modern scientific materialists. Like I was just saying before, God is basically energetic and or spatial. He exists in empty space. And that's what completes you, and it is completely unlike you, and it is completely unphysical. Physically, we desire completeness as well. You know, we desire food, we desire partners, we desire friends, we desire material wealth and places to live and survive, and plenty of physical things. We never have a shortage of desire for physical things. But these don't complete you. You're going to go on desiring them your whole life, but they will never make you complete. God, on the other hand, provides non-physical things that can complete you, or at least your non-physical self, your mind / spirit / soul. Those can be completed by God. But physically, you're going to go on desiring things your whole life and never be complete. Just now, something important occurred. I have been talking to / interfacing with God extensively this morning. Just now, I realized it's important not to view him as something complete in and of himself. God is that which completes you, completes all things in the universe, but nothing besides. Because God completes the universe, he isn't complete in and of himself. We are parts of him. We are parts that are completed by him. We are incomplete without him, and he is incomplete without us. I'll just rewind a bit because there's another interesting bit I wanted to cover. But I indeed wouldn't... Well, we talked previously about how a tendril connects you all the way to the Ein Sof / intelligent infinity / the black mirror at the edge of the universe. In response to that I wrote, but I indeed would rather not think of an edge of the universe. Could see black mirrors that reflect us existing in the form of ring galaxies, etc., which was one of the other old ideas. Ring galaxies. I made a great other video, which I actually put under the category of ASMR, called Grey Alien Types. And I expanded on how the tall greys are actually originating from a ring galaxy. Ring galaxies are very special. One of my other old ideas is that they could function as a black mirror. But they certainly function as some kind of macroscopic device or machine, because they are partially engineered by advanced species that have, evolved within them. So they are literal galaxy brains. A ring galaxy is a macroscopically networked computational machine. They are literal galaxy brains. Okay, let's go back to where we were before. All solids are incomplete. All solids are not what they seem. Looking at my coffee cup, would God and upper powers bother trying to complete it? It's just a cup. It would be more natural to try and complete our bodies because they have an inbuilt design for doing so. Our DNA. So would God and his upper powers, which is sort of angels basically, or maybe some alien species that are so advanced that you might be able to call them angels practically, would they bother trying to complete a coffee cup? Well, God consists of space, and your coffee cup cannot exist except within space and occupying a certain amount of space, and that is what completes it. And that is God. God is merely that which completes us. Wow, he is absolutely, totally unlike us in that case. Yes, true. On my run, my mail run, I work in a mail room at the moment, heard, "You are an incomplete soldier," or some such. Would be very strange for me to be or become any kind of soldier. Very far removed from my perception of myself, mostly, or anything I would allow myself to do. But I could be some kind of spiritual soldier, conceivably. Prefer the term warrior, really. But perhaps I need to be brought down to earth a little. I mean, I don't love the term soldier. It sounds far too obedient for my liking. On the other hand, I'm not very good at making any use of such freedom as is in fact afforded me. So if God and the upper powers want me to become some kind of metaphorical soldier, I'll try to remain open to it. A soldier of God, an angelic demon, lol. Why would I call that an angelic demon? Because soldiers have to do kind of demonic things in that they have to kill other people for the purpose of war, which is never good. But sometimes wars are defensive, or sometimes they're just necessary. Sometimes they're righteous, you might say. Although one should be extremely cautious of listening to politicians that try to promote wars as from the moral upper ground and from the basis of righteousness. And there's a war going on in the Middle East right now in which, well, one side in particular claims righteousness. But I'm not going to go into that right now. So yeah, perhaps I would prefer the term spiritual warrior. How about you? Do Do you resonate with the term spiritual warrior? But it was suggested to me by something spiritual, perhaps the voice of God, that I'm a spiritual soldier, which I don't like the sound of quite so much. Do you like that sound? But, when you think about it, it's not too bad. Maybe that's really what you ought to be. Maybe that's really what I ought to embrace. Become a spiritual soldier. Once again, a quote. What is the significance of passion in the greater universe? And the response, don't resent the other side of politics, their passion. But as a soldier, I may be called upon to fight them, particularly their excesses. And yeah, the other side of politics is getting pretty excessive at times, in modern times in particular. The games I do play are far more predictable. Okay, I'll just read the previous sentence. Thinking about the regret I have with respect to Mike for not playing Cyberpunk. I was told by a friend that Cyberpunk 2077 has been hugely patched and overhauled, and is now a really good game. To quote him, he said they No Man's Skied it, which is another game that they overhauled and made really good, at least as far as I know. I actually haven't played that one. And yet, I haven't played Cyberpunk either recently. Probably since it came out, like 3 years ago or whenever. I really should give it a go. The games I do play are far more predictable. As I mentioned in another video, I quite like what are called idle games, where you essentially don't do much. One I played just earlier is called Swarm Sim. That's a kind of a classic idle game, in my opinion. Not perfect, but if you like maths and you like numbers going up, it's pretty addictive. For a while, at least. So the games I do play are far more predictable. That seems to be what I like, doesn't it? God? Anything to say? Part of the reason I CBF playing other games is the sheer overhead required. I just couldn't be bothered learning how to play. I did my learning in life, and it was math. God of his own kind. Or is it complete or incomplete? That's a tough one, because I think there's even an incompleteness theorem to describe why math isn't complete. But these things are very difficult to properly understand, to properly reason about even. One directionality waiting room. Math is actually pretty closely aligned with things like that, with the sharpness of a knife, for example. God is still conceived of being quite antsy just sitting here. Wonder if I should go for a walk. If God said so, I would. But as usual, I get no answer. God is still conceived of being above us, though. So maybe exposing my head to the sky would be a good thing. I may just have no lunch today. I'm in a strong kind of mood. God is empowering me. I'm a soldier. Got to be tough. But it will wear you down just sitting here. Yeah, I hate sitting in my office chair all day. But I do it for probably 5 hours of the day. I get the feeling that the Christian God would want you to eat lunch, not deprive yourself. Only the gods/spiritual energy of other religions is more deprivational. Yeah, like Buddhism and so on, their spiritual practices include self-deprivation, but I don't know. In the past, Christianity included self-deprivation for the monks and so on, I'm pretty sure. These days it sort of isn't seen as very Christian, though, somehow. But my God isn't exactly the Christian one now, is he? Though I do sometimes visualize him in a compatible manner. On the other hand, I doubt he conforms to what many of the other religions say either. But then I probably don't know them well enough to say that. Just then had quite the trepidariness as a truck guy arrived. Actually, before that it says, went for a short walk around the outside of the building. Just then had quite the trepidariness as a truck guy arrived. Turns out he's for the cafe. You are a dog/soldier. Dog feels a bit excessive. Your feelings are those of a dog, I believe is the message here. Positively Pavlovian. Can I simply accept that as part of my incompleteness? Or am I obliged to improve in this regard? These are the sort of questions upon which it would be useful to have God's discernment. Well, all emotional responses begin in a somewhat dog-like place, I think it's fair to say. What about the fields emitting from my keyboard owing to its incompleteness? Yeah, so sometimes I visualize the fields because things are incomplete. They have to connect to the broader universe, including God, of course. So that your keyboard is incomplete, and where do the fields come from? Mostly I see them as coming out of the corners of the keys or any other corners or edges of solid objects. And I visualize them as like yellow curves and lines and things that are kind of wafting up towards infinity. What about the fields emitting from my keyboard owing to its incompleteness? They would surely continue to have structure at significant distance from the Earth, maybe even arbitrary distance. Thus, can God see them? Presumably. I suppose I haven't exactly decided where he resides. He probably shouldn't reside anywhere. And yet he is certainly associated with the sky, to my mind, as it represents the incompleteness of our own environment. Yeah, I mean, the Earth is incomplete. And the sky above our head represents incompleteness. The Earth is as a solid, looks complete because it's like a solid sphere. But it's connected to the sky. It's actually incomplete. And the atmosphere, you feel it's like a thin kind of thing surrounding the Earth, but there's no barrier there. It's open to the rest of space. So the Earth is incomplete. And to us, God therefore resides in the sky, being the force that's capable of completing the Earth and everything in creation. And of course, above the sky you have space. I like this incompleteness philosophy. Am I writing too much about it? Which will thereby just make it annoying after I eventually discard it? Am I going to eventually discard it? We'll see. On the walk, I was thinking how it forms a natural foil to the intense mathematicality I've grown up with. Math is all about the precision of objects, their edges in particular. Thus, to believe that edges aren't truly edges is the ultimate sacrilege to that mental mode. Quoting from yesterday, pertaining to my lack of motivation to solve or complexify my game, blockchain could involve comparable probability games, and that would properly motivate you to play well, surely. In response, did some searching and reading about blockchain games then, read about BNB chain in particular. It uses finalization, which was discussed in the Gasper Ethereum document I read a while ago, 4+ months ago if I had to guess. It means that certain blocks, which are the finalized blocks, couldn't be reverted without a substantial proportion of verifiers getting slashed, which I think means losing their stake, if at the very least. I think this means losing their money/stake. Soldier on! As a spiritual soldier, is there a way I can meaningfully participate in this stuff? What do you guys think? Do you know much about blockchains? Do you think the concept of finalization is helpful, which is, I think, used by some versions of Ethereum, or may not quite have been adopted yet? It's used by proof-of-stake blockchains, I believe, in particular. Do you think that's a better way of doing things than Bitcoin and other similar ones that use proof of work? It's very hard to get your head around all of it and become an expert in blockchain, that's for sure. But if anybody is an expert in blockchain, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, quote from a year earlier. It would seem to be appropriate for some kind of principle to imply that love must be known, understood. In response, I want the love of God and the upper powers. This is longing, this desire for love. Break. Our potential interactions with higher species seem limited by very dry facts. Specifically, they would want to preserve our ability to grow up or evolve at our own pace. Enjoy your childhood. They would in fact know that such was practically necessary. Okay, quote, connection with godlike powers requires give and take, requires development, requires connection, which can never be purely one-directional. God is capable of one-directionality to a degree. He is capable of giving without receiving, of transcending all expectations and boundaries in doing so. But why would he? It's not a knot for completeness, because you can't be physically complete. Only by union with him. Well, surely morality has some higher significance. He might save you then, if you were worth saving, if you understood and pledged yourself appropriately, whatever that would be. But I'm getting there, slowly, I think. What do you guys think? Would God save you if you were worth saving? If you understood and pledged yourself appropriately? Well, one thing you have to pledge is to understand, you have to pledge to God that you are incomplete and that only He completes you. That's powerful, because that is a true understanding of God and of the spiritual realm, which very few people understand, but way too many people have opinions on. And way too many organized religions have been created to control and divvy out the allowed opinions on. Break. I don't know how much patience I have left for games of epic subtlety, like email highlights following my cursor intermittently when I'm over another window. You want to communicate with me, or just make me understand that my defenses are easily penetrated? But I know that already. Oh well, hopefully we can both appreciate a compatible kind of God/spirituality. One thing I will say is that due to the responsiveness, at least it's undeniable, whereas these things are often quite deniable/doubtable. Did get a space in Fox Dungeon yesterday. So that's also a thing. To be precise, 0_0_9.py is the file name of Fox Dungeon that I play. Playful foxes in the machine. Do you guys ever experience that? Do you ever experience computer weird bugs that feel a bit like some force is trying to communicate with you through the computers? I've experienced that a number of times, definitely. And it's ongoing when I'm at work. But they're very subtle, and sometimes I just don't have the patience to play their games. I wish I did, or at least I wish it would go somewhere, but for the time being, I think they're just playing games. Maybe they're trying to train me to communicate or to learn what their specific ways of communication, because you have to be very subtle in this world of electronic communication, don't you? But they can certainly communicate with us, the alien powers, the hackers, some of whom are actually alien powers. I don't know if you're allowed to say that on YouTube. That's too kind of upbeat, too positive to think of alien powers actually wanting to hack our systems to protect and elevate us. No, you're not allowed to say that on YouTube. Let it hereby be acknowledged that this is a sacred document protected by the power of the Fermat hexagon. Bind! Let us continue. (2211_15). Quote, what I have been thinking about this morning since bed is the idea that work is like, and the like, is about completionism, which has certainly been written down before, which contrasts with continuityism. Continuity is like the state of your body/mind when you're just lying in bed, letting your mind wander mostly. And end quote. Well, that's a different angle on completeness. Maybe it's true. Everything needs completing to some degree. Then entropy, i.e. incompleteness, comes and ravages it. And we have to fix it to bring back some degree of temporary completeness to it. It's strange that we have to work to create completeness in all things. We are working towards our own destruction, as complete completeness would surely be total unification with God/universe, which would also be the end of all things, all physical things anyway. The opposite of continuity, however, is discreteness. Don't ask how I know that, it just is. It's actually very much an asymmetrical opposite. Maybe one of the foundational ones, as far as the math of the universe is concerned. Quote, so I've been asking myself while at work, when I get slight grumpiness creeping in, why are you so against a bit of completion? End quote. Why? It should be obvious. Only God can safely provide us with completeness. He can do so because of what he is, something incredibly massive and disparate, something energetic, predominantly non-physical. And yet here we are on earth, internally compelled by longing to seek completeness. That's okay, maybe. Maybe the lesson is that we are seeking God, or something beyond physical, in order to complete us. Break. Undeniable Fox games continue. It's actually getting annoying. Trying to close my eyes and breathe, that kind of thing can help, like with the AJ stream yesterday. Complete me, God. Maybe they are testing my heart. I do find it somewhat vigorous at times. And yet, is that also a strength? We'll see, I guess. Yeah, so news, if you haven't realized it yet, all the electronic devices are connected to your heart. Your heart is the most powerful electromagnetic organ in your body. It has a massive electromagnetic field, which some people will call an aura or something like that. So your heart is actually very powerful, and many devices can kind of probe your heart and probe those fields. And they can actually see you, even from space, just based on your heart field. And based on the collective human heart field. I think this continuity versus completion thing has some merit, but I'm sort of not ready for it right now. Anyways, according to current philosophy, only God can complete you, and that is perhaps becoming more so as the universe continues to evolve. God is with us on that journey. He is evolving also, because the universe is expanding, or otherwise changing, particularly its gaseous and vacuuminous regions which belong to him. This makes it very hard to predict the future. Some things may become more like they were in the past, in contrast with naive rules of purely physical evolution. I think that basically stands on its own. The final two lines of the file are just a couple of quotes from previous files. Masters of the meeting verse, brimming with magic from the mundane. That's how I like to view my episodes, or at least how I fantasize they ought to be, or how I wanted to create a movie that would be brimming with magic from the mundane. Every shot kind of perfect in that sense. Okay, I think that's enough for today, or at least for this particular file. I hope the discussion has stimulated some thoughts in you. We are, after all, exploring the true nature of God, which is very hard to do. And like I said before, many have commented upon it. Way too many people have opinions, although it's more the case that organized religion tries to force specific opinions on us, whereas God is totally incorporeal. He's basically the vacuum of space, but he completes us and all things that are physical. None of them could function or survive without God. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to your comments, and thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos. Adios.